Welcome, school counselors, to our Essential Elements of Lesson Planning webinar. We are so excited that you have tuned in to talk about this important feature of a comprehensive school counseling program. My name is Sarah Bazemore. I'm the school counseling specialist here at the Department of Ed. I still consider myself a school counselor, so I always struggle with saying former school counselor, but I have been both an elementary and middle school counselor, and prior to that was a teacher in both middle school and elementary school level. And I am super excited and honored to introduce my co-presenter and counseling extraordinaire, Gente, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Hey everybody, I'm Gente Scott Mayo, and I am a middle school counselor currently in Henrico County. I have elementary and middle school experience, and I'm also on the Virginia School Counselor Association Board of Directors. So I'm super excited that Sarah has invited me to help her with this webinar and extend some resources to you all.
So Gente and I go back. We're both school counselors together in the same division, and I feel like this is a cool opportunity for us because we have both had so many conversations around lessons, and we both have such a passion for this piece of comprehensive school counseling program. And I'm just really thrilled to have the opportunity to co-present with her on this. And so real quickly, we're going to share with you a couple of the goals or the takeaways that we hope you will get from your attendance today. First, we hope that you will understand the importance of lesson planning and that you will gain an understanding of just the fundamentals of lesson planning. I think this is super important because I'm very fortunate in that I had that teaching experience. And so part of my coursework when I went to college was to obviously learn about the different pieces of a lesson plan. But I know that depending on what university you went through to get your school counseling degree, you may or may not have had that as part of your training. So I think it's important for all of us to have an understanding of the components of a proper lesson plan so that we can deliver instruction in the best way possible. We're going to also share with you some tips and strategies for successful lesson planning, and then also some resources and some exciting places where you can go to find lesson plans as well as tools. So first, why even bother with lesson planning? It is one more thing, right? A lot of my fellow counselors will say, like, I have it, it's all up here. I don't need to do a lesson plan. But there's a lot of reasons to go to the trouble of actually writing out a lesson plan. And one is consistency. It's the consistency between professionals, as well as consistency with the expectations around what teachers are expected to do. And for us to be seen in that same professional light, we should be also preparing lesson plans. It also allows for consistency between classrooms and consistency with the instruction that's being delivered, so that if you're delivering the instruction, then or the lesson, you're consistent between groups. Or if perhaps there's multiple school counselors going in and delivering the same lesson, a lesson plan is going to provide some fidelity and some consistency between those lessons. It's also best practice for effective delivery. There's lots of research behind the value of completing a lesson plan and having some of the components that we're going to talk about today, and why that is going to really make your lesson, it's going to make or break your lesson. It's the accountability factor, and the fact that we can have evidence of what we are doing in the classroom and share that evidence with stakeholders. It also is going to help you to align your goals and ensure that what you are doing in the classroom is actually hitting those targets. And it's going to help you to kind of think about what data you need to bring into your lesson planning and make sure that you're thinking about those pieces prior to going in and delivering a lesson. It allows for collaboration with others as well. So one of the things that I know when I was working with Gente, we used to love to share lesson plans with one another. And if you don't go through the trouble of writing a lesson plan, if it is all up in your head, then you can't share or really collaborate with other school counselors. And then this one is really important. Jinte and I were actually just talking about this one, that a lesson plan and delivering lesson at a tier 1 level to all students on your caseload is a really important marketing tool. And I'm going to let Jinte speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, so, I really want to piggyback off Sarah's comment about consistency, just kind of rolling back for a second. It's important that school counselors speak the same language as teachers and administrators when we talk about components of a lesson plan delivery. Lesson plan is kind of the common ground that kind of brings us all together. I truly think that all school counselors just have the power to be great and be a great resource for kids. And so I really like being able to share things and also be on the receiving end of the sharing as well. So I really think it's like she said, when everything's all in your head, it's kind of hard to be able to kind of share things with other professionals and to be able to duplicate things. We all work so hard as school counselors and we have so much on our plate. So it's just nice to be able to take that off and to be able to share things and not have to recreate the wheel over and over again.
Excellent. And I think, it's so important that our impression that we make when we go into classrooms is a strong one, not only just for the teachers that are watching and making decisions on, making or having thoughts about, what we're doing with their students, but then also kids are watching and are forming their own opinions on whether or not, where the professional that they might want to go to if they need support with something. So it's really important that we are intentional and thoughtful in our lesson plan delivery. And then, Jinte spoke to this a little bit with the advocacy piece of it, but I think this is what really separates us from the old school traditional guidance counselor and really steps into that professional school counseling role, is embracing the power of a really well done lesson plan. And what I've always loved is that every time I do a lesson and I go back and I revisit my plan, I always can tweak it a little bit and improve upon it. And it's harder to do that and to grow and to become more effective in your practice if you don't have that plan to revisit each year and look at and improve upon it. Some of my best lessons are the ones that I've been doing since my first year as a school counselor, because they've just evolved and turned into these really fine-tuned instruments for delivering instruction.
I just think it helps with visibility and just it's such an effective marketing tool.
I agree. So hopefully we've sold you, and you're, if you weren't a big fan of lesson planning, you are now, or at least you're considering it. But this is by no means what has to be used by anyone. The ASCA lesson plan template is a great one, or you might already have a lesson plan template that you feel like is really effective. But this is one that we created that's really, we feel like it's pretty simple, and it goes through and has a place for all of the components that we're going to speak to today. And you can access this template. We're going to show you where you can find it at the end of the presentation, so that if you are interested in utilizing the template that we're speaking to, you'll know where to find it. So the first part of a really effective lesson plan, I feel like this is consistent in almost every template that you look at, is there's almost these planning points. And the way I look at it is this is your map. So if you're going on a trip and you're trying to map it out and plan for it, you're going to think about what you need to pack. So that's your materials. Those are the things that you need to make sure that you have available. I think it's something that I used to overlook and then realize the value in it, especially if I'm doing an activity. Remembering to bring something like my own tape so that I don't have to find it in the classroom, or the cut up 3x5 cards or whatever it might be. Just having those resources, those materials listed, can really save you, because it's a place that you can look really quickly and be like, oh yeah, I don't want to forget to bring whatever it might be. Obviously, you want to talk about what grade level or grade levels this lesson plan would be effective for or was designed for. The duration of the lesson. Is it a 30-minute, 45-minute, maybe even an hour-long lesson? What the learning objectives are. And this is really important, but this is where you're going to talk about where you're headed. So what is the destination? What are you hoping students will achieve? And the way that I was always taught to write learning objectives is either to say the student will be able to, and specifically state what the student is going to be able to do as a result of your lesson, or you can say it in a I can statement. So from the student's perspective of saying, I can now fill in the blank. I can now explain what a growth mindset is, or I can now organize my agenda, or whatever the skill is that you're trying to teach. And why I think this is so important is that it's a step past just the standards that you're covering, and it really helps you to zone in on a skill and kind of drill down to exactly what is it that you want students to gain from your lesson. And so writing those objectives, even if it's just one objective, can really help you to focus in on the main important parts of what you're trying to accomplish.
And this portion of the lesson plan is just really important for, as Sarah alluded to, just organization and logistics. I used to, especially if it's a lesson that you are having to kind of dust off, while I haven't done this one in a while, and kind of pull that one out and organize your materials ahead of time. I used to have a cart that I used. I used to have bins that I organized ahead of time for the month. So just think about this section as just really an organization tool.
Yep, I think that's a great way of explaining it. And it's just, just like a well-planned trip, taking the time to set this part up is something that we don't want to overlook, because it really does have a lot of value in like Gente said, making us, organized and also presenting as a professional. So then the next stage is tools to evaluate the learning. How are you going to show that students are different because of the instruction or the lesson that you delivered? So this is so vital and so important, and it should really be directly connected to whatever your learning objective is. So if the objective was that a student would be able to display a specific skill, then whatever you're going to use to evaluate that learning should be directly connected to that skill. So one thing that we know that ASCA really pushes and advocates for us school counselors to do in the National School Counseling Model is the use of outcome data, which is so valuable and so important for us to really look at the data that speaks the same language as administrators and other stakeholders in the school. And the three types of outcome data are discipline data, attendance data, and achievement data. And one way that I really try to explain this is, and I try to think about it in my own head this way, is really these are data sources that we have no direct control over. So we're not the one collecting this data. And that gives any impact that we might have, it gives it some legitimacy in the fact that any growth that happens is truly a result of a change in the students. And so this can look like classroom work completion. So perhaps, if a teacher came to you and said that she or he had recognized that there was a certain class, maybe it was one period of their day that was really struggling with turning in work. And so you went in and did a lesson on the importance of completing your classwork and best practices for doing that. And then as a result, the independent classwork for that period increased by whatever it might be. That would be a great example of a direct result of your lesson. Another one would be increasing the number of how often students are arriving on time to a class, or a decrease in the number of reports of students using racial slurs or demeaning language. That was one that I had a fifth grade group that was really struggling with just saying some inappropriate things to one another, and just really demeaning and derogatory. Everything from using, talking about students' disabilities as a way to cut each other down, to throwing out racial slurs that, even though they said were perhaps in jest, were really hurtful and causing some major issues. And the teacher was reporting on average, let's just say it was 7 to 8 of these instances a day. And then I went in and did my lesson. And then as a result of that, that report went down. There were less office referrals, or maybe if your school is collecting minor behavior incident forms, that would be a great way to show an impact. But what I want to really speak to is that direct correlation between your lesson and the impact on that outcome data. So sometimes I think we try to go too big, and we will, for example, say, I went in and did a lesson on, career, and had students exploring different career options. And then we know that having students connect what they're learning to future post-secondary goals can increase students' attendance. However, that's too far removed to say that a lesson where you just did one lesson on talking about post-secondary goals, and then you said that had a result of overall, and the improvement of attendance for a grade level for the year. There's a major gap and disconnect between that data source and your lesson. So really asking yourself and trying to make sure that there's no confounding variables that really can, so that the evaluation tool and the data that you're talking about is directly linked as closely as possible to the work that you're doing. And I hope that makes sense, because I know it's a difficult thing for us to wrap our brain around. Jinte, did you want to add anything to that, talking directly about outcome data?
Yeah, I think good jumping off points or good places to form goals would be looking at school report cards and looking at that data and seeing what are the needs of your school. What are the things that students could benefit from working toward? I also usually do at the end of every year a school counseling evaluation, and I have teachers and staff do that. So I kind of look at the trends that are kind of popping up on that to come up with some goals for the following year.
So sometimes we aren't always able to directly use outcome data, that traditional sense, for evaluating our lessons. And that's okay, because there's other really relevant and awesome ways for us to show that we're making an impact on students. And so these are some examples. We all know the traditional pre and post test, but then there's also just some ways that we can do some informal assessment examples. Even if it's just at the beginning of the lesson saying to students, how many of you can tell me what the word diversity means? And seeing how many of them raise their hand and are able to tell you to define that. And then at the end of the lesson, you ask again and you see how many hands go up. It can be something as simple as that to even more concrete ways for assessing learning, like exit tickets and student surveys or teacher surveys. Collecting student work is another excellent thing to do. So if you have students completing a worksheet or an activity sheet, collecting that so that you can see, did they really get it? Did they really understand? And then you can use, a certain question on there to say 97% of the fourth graders were able to identify at least one career that they wanted to explore in the future, or whatever it might be. Another really great way for you to show impact on learning is through pre and post observations. So one thing I really loved to do was, if I had a class that, let's just say the teacher said was really struggling with transitions, and during a transition between lunch and into the classroom, the teacher reported that students were taking a certain amount of time, or this behavior was occurring really frequently during that time period. So before my lesson, I would try to go in and observe the class and this is a tool that I used to use. And so before my lesson, I would go in, and during that time period, every time I saw the behavior that the teacher was concerned about, I would just put a little check mark in the circles. And so let's say I stayed in there for 20 minutes. That would give me kind of a baseline. And then when I would go in and do my lesson, I even would say to the kids, did you see me in here the other day? Do you know why I was in here? I was doing this. And guess how many times I saw this behavior happen? And I would share with them the results of that observation. And then after the lesson, I always told them, I'm going to come back and let's see if we've improved, because now you understand how to, what to do instead, or now you understand how to make a better choice. And then after the lesson, I would go in at the same time and stay for the same amount of time. And again, just track that specific behavior. And this was a really great way for me to show a direct correlation between the lesson that I delivered and an impact on student behavior. And then these are some links that I wanted to share with you that Gente and I both felt like were great examples of how you can evaluate learning. Kahoot, I know, is one of my favorites. It's a really cool way to do an interactive quiz with students, and it's free. Mentimeter is another one that allows you to do live polling or create word clouds with students. It's also free. Plickers, Gente, have you ever heard of Plickers or used those?
I've never used Plickers, but I've always been mesmerized by them. They're really, really cool.
They're super cool. So they're really, and the great thing about it is they take a little bit of effort to create, but once you've created them, they're there and you can use them, over and over again with students. But they're basically QR codes where students hold it up in a different way to show an answer, a multiple choice answer to a question that you might pose. And then you can scan the room with your phone and quickly see how many of them have selected a certain answer choice. So it would be a way of gathering how comfortable they feel with a concept, how they're feeling, or even if you wanted to ask a direct question where there was a right or wrong answer, you could evaluate it in a quick and easy way, and the kids really enjoy it. And then these are some different exit ticket examples as well, and this is something Gente and I both really love is the exit ticket, I guess, concept. And I'm going to click on the sample sheet. And Gente, I'm going to let you kind of speak to how you've used exit tickets.
I do use Kahoot a lot. I love Kahoot. I use exit tickets a lot just because I think sometimes for time-wise, it may not be appropriate for you to have time to do a pre and post test. So really important for you to just find out, did they grasp the concept I was teaching? And, how did they interpret that information? How are they going to apply that to their real life, to their daily life? I tell all my students, I don't want them to just understand what I'm teaching them. I want them to understand why, because I want them to be able to connect with that relevance. So yeah, I use exit tickets a lot. I think another thing that we have to remember about using data in classroom lessons is that we have to not make it this lofty, crazy goal, something that is unattainable. We have to realize that, you can set small goals. If you just want to start out with exit tickets because that seems easiest, then that is okay. I love how, some of the examples that Sarah gave are kind of tie in modern technology with, things that kids are kind of drawn to. She has a really neat one that looks at using write a tweet about, what you learned today. And then the one she's showing you now has some kind of digital graphics that I really liked. I also think it's important to understand that creativity and data can live in the same world. They can be in the same sentence. I think a lot of times when we think of data, we think of, oh, it's numbers, it's just black and white. But I don't think we have to think of data as something that's policed. Oh, in order for me to do data, it must be an exit ticket, or it must be a pre and post test. And I have to make a grip model after. Set small goals and work from those.
I love that statement about creativity and data living in the same world, because that's something that we often don't think of those two coexisting. So these are all templates that, again, we're going to give you access to and show you where you can find them. And what I like about these is that when I use these, I could use them almost for any lesson because they're not necessarily specific to a certain content. So you could copy a lot of these and have them just at your disposal, and use as appropriate depending on what concept. So this one's like a full page where it kind of would be something that you would walk the students throughout the lesson perhaps, and have them go back to this note sheet. And then this would be an example of like work that you would want to collect so that you could read what they wrote and really see what they got from your instruction. This one, like Jinte was talking about, this is like more of that traditional exit ticket where you would cut these up and it would be smaller and you would just give one to every student, and collect it on your way out. But what I liked about this one was that I also had them evaluate me and give me feedback on how they felt like the lesson went. You know, was this a 4-star lesson, a 3-star lesson? And I even was very specific with them about what that meant to give it a 4-star. But I kept this vague, the closing question, because this was something I often used for a variety of lessons. And so on my last slide, I would have a closing question. And depending on whatever that was, this exit ticket doesn't necessarily state the actual question, but my slide or my presentation would. And then this one I've done before, and then I've selected a couple of them to create almost a bulletin board, I guess, to show student work and student learning from the lesson. So when I've collected these, I've gone through and kind of picked some of the standouts, the ones that I felt like students really put a lot of thought into, and displayed those visually for other students to even see. And it was a great, again, just a way to show that consistency between what we're doing and what teachers are doing, and to do a visual representation of what school counseling is looking like in the building. One of my favorites was I had a student who I'd never thought of this, but she actually drew a photo, like what if somebody had taken us like an actual snapshot during my lesson. And I thought that was so creative. And then she had, you know, words underneath it explaining like what it was. And I thought that was really a really cute idea. And so I started to encourage, after she did that, I started to encourage other students to think, if you had taken a snapshot, what would it have been? Because sometimes kids are going to be way more engaged in doing something if you allow them to be creative, like Jinte was just saying, than just, you know, having to write a sentence, because some students really, we all know, are not always excited to write. And this is Kahoot. I know Jinte said she used this a lot, but if you have never seen this or never explored Kahoot, I really encourage you to do so. It is one of the simplest, easiest, coolest ways to get kids engaged. And it's just super fun. All right. And so the next part is talking about the introduction. And this is so important because this is where you're going to give students that first taste of your lesson. And we try to kind of come up with a way to visually represent all of the important pieces of an introduction. It's not long. Your introduction should be, you know, around 2 to 3 minutes, but it's really what are going to be the first things that come out of your mouth? What is going to be the first thing that you present to students to engage them in this learning or this work? And, you know, this is something where you're going to, it can also make or break your lesson. You know, what is the environment, the expectations, the climate of the classroom that you are establishing. And, you know, I think about some of my introductions. I used to love to bring in props. Jinte, do you do props too sometimes? Yeah, I think
absolutely.
Props, like we'll grab a kid's attention better than anything else. And one of my favorite was I actually used to bring in a balloon and have on the balloon, I would write like the word of that we were going to be talking about, or something that was like really important that I wanted them to know. And I would hold the balloon with that word on it, because like if it was growth mindset, because for whatever reason, that would always kind of get their attention. And it was a way for us to stay focused on kind of the topic that we were learning about. So something to get them excited, whatever it might be, to set that climate, set that expectation. Also it's a chance for you to just kind of reintroduce yourself every time. Hopefully they know who you are, but it's almost just that chance for you to then bring them in and just kind of connect with them. And also I like the binoculars because it kind of shows the importance of looking ahead and what are we going to be doing today during this lesson? Where are we headed? What does it look like? Students, especially students who've experienced trauma, really value having that look ahead at what is going to happen today during this lesson. And it can also be a great way to proactively, keep your lesson and classroom management in check by just letting them know we're going to do this, this, and this today. And the goal is this. So I think those are some of the big important pieces of that introduction. But I know that this is something that's near and dear to Jentay's heart as well. So I'm going to let her speak a little bit too around the value of doing a good introduction to your lesson.
So Sarah and I always joke about about the word anticipatory set. We laugh because I tell her it's like her teacher word, and when she started using that word, I took it and I ran with it, and I feel very fancy when I use anticipatory set because it just sounds cool. But this is your time to establish rapport. Maybe slip in a little tidbit to help your students learn more about you, maybe like a fun fact about you. This is your chance to be high energy because you want to hook them in. You think about it as a hook. If you're fishing, you want to be able to reel them in. And this is also, as we alluded to before, just your marketing tool. This is the chance that you make an impression upon kids to say, wow, this person seems really nice. They seem really friendly. Or, hey, I've never talked to her before, but I'm kind of going through something now. And I think she might be a good person to talk to. She seems really nice. And, this is also your chance to make a memorable impact on kids. I try to approach every single day that I get to be a school counselor as, how can I positively impact a child in a way that's going to change their life or impact their life? And so this is one of those opportunities to be able to impact the masses. So yeah, just really, the purpose of this is really just getting them excited about what you're about to do. And usually they're pretty excited about having you there anyway, because it's not like they have a school counseling lesson every day. So really kind of hone in and take advantage of that.
Yeah. I think something you said earlier too, that I want to circle back to is also telling them the why this is important can be a great thing to speak to in that introduction. Telling them this is important for you because da, 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 and really explaining to them the value of the lesson can be a big piece of a great hook or anticipatory set, because it gets them invested in what they're about to do. And this can be anything. I mean, I used to also find really cool pictures or even like short little videos that just kind of opens their mind to the concept and gets them thinking in a new way. But just anything that's going to draw them in. Another thing to think about is if you have things that you need to set up for your lesson, having an introduction or even like something at the very beginning of your lesson that's going to have students engaged and busy, so that you can then set up for whatever activity you might want to do, is a great way for you to proactively plan so that your time is well spent and that the students are always engaged in something, even if you have to do some prep work to get things ready. So then once you've introduced the concept and talked about the goals of the lesson and what's going to happen that day, and started sort of giving the students that sample or that first taste, you're going to jump into your instruction and talking about and just really delivering either information about a new skill or some new content that you want them to understand. Delivery of instruction can be in a variety of different ways. It can be anything from your traditional lecture to reading a book to doing an experiment. One of my favorite lessons where I talked about the importance of time management was where I did this experiment with a glass jar, ping pong balls, and rice. Many of you may have seen this before. It's not something I came up with, but you talk about the rice represents the fun stuff that you want to do, the things that are not necessarily on your to-do list and or your homework, and then the ping pong balls, or you could do rocks, represent the things that you are required to do in order to finish all your homework or complete all your classwork. And so your responsibilities, I guess, is the best way to say it. So I would talk about the difference between responsibilities and things that we enjoy doing, and the importance of balancing those out and how they can coexist. And as I talked about it, the first time I did it, I put all the rice in first and then tried to fit the rocks in, and they don't fit. And then I did it again, where we put in the rocks first and then we pour in the rice, and then, oh my gosh, everything fits because we prioritized our responsibilities. So coming up with a cool way or an experiment or a way to visually represent what you're trying to teach is so important, because we know that kids are not going to engage very well if they don't have other stimuli to really keep them active. You do have students who can learn just with auditory information, but not many of them. And so this is a good thing to keep in mind. And I know that it only goes to age 10, and we have students that go well past that. But to know what is the attention span, the developmentally appropriate amount of time for you to speak at students and still maintain their attention. And I think that it's a little shocking when you look at the amount of time that you can really actually directly speak to kids and expect them to engage. Because if we are going well past 30 minutes where we're just asking students to sit and get, we're going to lose a lot of them. So I think we have to kind of keep that in mind and think about what really is appropriate developmentally too for us to be delivering instruction verbally with students. Jinte, did you want to speak to this as well?
So for this part of your lesson or this part of your lesson plan, I think it's really important for you to look at this as your teaching time. And also, this is the basis of the evaluation and the evaluation tools that you're going to use in your lesson. So this is where you're teaching the material that you're hopefully going to later evaluate. And, as Sarah said, and I live by a train track, so welcome to working at home. You can probably hear that in the background. But as Sarah alluded to a little bit before, there can be lots of different approaches to lessons that will affect this section of your lesson plan. So if it's a more traditional lesson, you might read a book or you might show a video. If you're doing a project-based lesson, this might be a chance where students can work together as partners. If you're doing lessons where you're going to use stations, this might be a chance for station work. So this is really just a place where they have a chance to practice a skill and that you're really instructing them. If they're practicing a skill, you're still providing some level of instruction.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So then the next piece is where you've provided them with this new skill or this new content. They've taken in that information, and now we want to give them the opportunity to practice it or to engage in an activity that allows them to really take ownership of that learning. And I really loved this this graphic because I think we've all felt this before when we've been sitting in a lecture or a classroom, and we've also seen when you walk by classrooms and you see that students have been sitting for a long time, they do disengage. And so we need to make sure that we allow our students to do something in our lesson. We give them a task, an activity, or an opportunity to practice that skill. And that's going to really be where we are, right? If we're going to go into the brain science behind it, where we're connecting those neurons and we're strengthening that connection, and we're really driving that deeper understanding, where we take it to that next level where students not only retain it, but they can apply it. So Jinte, did you want to speak to this a little as well? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. This is a point in our lesson that that it's good to think of I do, you do, I do, we do, you do.
Mm,
And so, like I said before, if you're going to incorporate stations or something like that in your your actual skill building when you're actually teaching a skill, you want to really engage them heavily on our last slide to where you're really instructing them. This is a chance to kind of pull back the reins and kind of see where they're going to take that skill. So, I like to use I do, we do, you do. So I do it as an example. We maybe do it together, and then maybe you do it now. Show that this is a chance for you to show your learning.
that's awesome. And this can be anything from like where you're allowing students to have collaborative conversations with one another, where they're processing what they learned and you're posing different discussion questions. It can be an activity sheet. It can be centers. It can be, a project. It can be all kinds of different things. It can be them going on a web page and exploring different career clusters. But this is the meat of your lesson. This is the thing that the kids are going to really remember. This is probably what the piece of it's going to take the most time. And it's also the piece that really requires the most planning, in my opinion. It's where you really have to think about, all the ins and outs of what that activity or practice is going to look like.
I would agree. This is going to be the bulk of your lesson.
Yeah, I like to think of lessons almost as like a sandwich. Like your introduction and your instruction is the top piece of bread, and then your activity or your practice is that meat in the middle, and then we're going to roll into now that bottom piece of bread, which is your closure. And this is so essential, and it's something that I often struggled with as a school counselor because I'm not the best at managing my time when I go into lessons. I get really carried away with the students and enjoying just being in there. And then the next thing I know, I look up and I'm like, I got to be out of here in 2 minutes. So really allowing time and having a planned closure for your lesson is so important because it really locks in that learning and it closes the door on what you've done. It allows for effective transition between you and the classroom teacher. It's also one of the best things you can do for students that have experienced trauma. It's a trauma sensitive approach is to show a definite end and have that feeling of completion and allowing students to recognize that transition and it's being done in a very concrete way, not a rushed way, can be so important because we know that kids really crave that consistency. So being, having that consistent closure and saying, this is what we learned today. It might be giving them an evaluation tool. It might be allowing them to share out some ideas or some thoughts, but having a purposeful closure, a way to wrap it all up, lock that door and hand over the keys to the teacher to then open up a new concept is so very important. Jinte, did you want to speak to this as well?
Yes. So with Sarah mentioning just kind of that trauma sensitive approach, kids need to know, what they can depend on, without making promises you can't keep. I usually like to close lessons by letting them know what are my plans for the future, for future lessons. When will they see me again?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when they have this closure, they feel better about kind of seeing you go, especially if they've just kind of gotten really attached to you for that amount of time that you're there. And like I said, school counseling lessons many times are a novelty. They get really excited. And so when it's time for you to leave, that can be pretty disappointing to them. I also like to close lessons by encouraging students to go home and talk to their families about what they learned and what they talked about. I think that's a great way to reinforce material, but I also think it's a great way to encourage them to have those conversations at home. We can't go home with our students. I know some of us sometimes would like to, or would like to bring them home with us sometimes, but I think that you know, a lot of families are not having conversations. They're not talking about, you know, what their students are learning. And so if you can just, that just give you another opportunity to kind of plant that nugget.
That's a great point. And even having them role play with a partner. What, when you go home today, what's something you're going to share with your adult at home about what you learned today? You know, it's something, as you were speaking, Jente, I just remembered that I used to do when I was, when I was a middle school counselor, was when I finished a lesson on a certain topic, I had these, like a pennant, and it said that the whatever it was that we learned about, like, for example, if we learned about time management, the pennant might have said time management, and I was like, you've earned your time management pennant. And the teacher had a place where she hung those in the classroom, and it was a great way to reinforce the learning. And it was neat because the kids saw, you know, every time I did a lesson, there was another pennant on this board in their classroom. And their teacher was able to also refer back to that and be like, well, I know that you've learned about growth mindset because Ms. Bazemore did a lesson on it. And it was a way to circle back, but also to tie a nice neat bow on it and to say, like, congratulations, you've, you know, mastered this concept, or you know what this is. So coming up with ways that you can do that each time is so very, very important, just for so many reasons. And it's something I know that was a weakness for me. I often would plan these great closures, but then didn't necessarily always get to deliver them. So just making sure that you allow for that is so vital. And so finally, we're super excited about this. We have a group on an actual school counseling group on this website called Go Open Virginia. And when you go to the website, you can find our group. I'm gonna wait for it to come up, by clicking groups and then scrolling through and finding the school counseling little icon that looks like this. And so right now there's not too much there, but hopefully this is just gonna be a library that continues to grow. We're gonna have example lesson plans here, but then in addition, we're also gonna put up that template that we showed you at the beginning, as well as those exit tick examples and the frequency data collection sheet, and any other lesson planning tools or tricks, I guess you could say, that we come across or others share with us that we think would be for the good of the group. So this is a great way for you to go and see other lesson plans, and also contribute. If you ever want to contribute to this, we're gonna also have opportunities for that as well. And you can create a group or account on Go Open Virginia. It's a free resource. And then you can actually join the group and be able to just participate in discussions and get alerts when new resources are posted, all that great stuff. So we're very excited about all of the opportunities that this resource is going to give us to be able to collaborate on a state level. And so finally, we wanted to kind of practice what we preach, right? And actually kind of do our own version of this, of a closure, by kind of sharing with you some final takeaways, some unwritten laws of lesson planning. I'm gonna let Jente share hers first.
So give yourself what I like to call first lesson grace. I can recall having a big idea and getting really excited about teaching a particular lesson or topic or doing an activity. And I left the classroom and I stood outside the door like I just went to war. And I was like, I have got to figure out a better way to do that, or I am not going to do it that way again. And, you know, really being honest with yourself. What went well? But what do I need to improve upon? How can I do that differently? And just giving yourself that grace, you know, when you try new things. I think that if we look at trying new things as being a disaster every time, then we won't do it. We'll just do the same old thing all the time. And that doesn't benefit kids, because kids are ever evolving and ever changing, and their needs are evolving and changing. So I think it's really important to, give yourself grace. If it was a lesson that was rough, admit that it was rough and just kind of move on with that. And I can attest that that is something that I have even done before.
Yeah, I think master teachers would share that they've had lessons that they thought were going to go great and then they didn't. I mean, we've all experienced that, and I think that's so important to speak to. Jinte, I'm glad that you bring that up, because we all need to just be aware that no one is perfect. No lesson plan is perfect. No one is ever able to always deliver a lesson 100% of the time without anything ever going wrong. So being okay with mistakes and being okay with failure is something we tell our students to be accepting of, but we don't often give ourselves that same permission. So I'm glad that you put that out there. And then I think being relatable is so important. This is a chance for kids to connect with you on a personal level. So, it's you want to be professional, you want to go in and deliver content and instruction, but you also want to show them that you're a human, that you care, and that you want to connect with them. And so making sure that that is at the heart of your lesson is so important. And being genuine to who you are. If you are doing a lesson plan that belongs to someone else, that someone else designed and delivered or created, and it doesn't feel like your style, fix it, tweak it, change it. Because if it's not something that you genuinely align with, kids are going to sense that. They're really good at smelling out, if someone's being disingenuous or doesn't have ownership over something. So make it your own. Make it be something you feel comfortable with and you're excited about, and it's a reflection on your personality. For example, I used to love doing mixed pair shares, which is a Kagan strategy, where I would play music and the students would dance around the room, and then I would freeze the music, and whoever they were standing next to was their partner for a discussion question. And I loved it. And I would dance along with them and play around, during that time with them. And it was a chance for me to be relatable, because I love dancing and I love music. But I had a fellow school counselor that was in my department as well, and that just wasn't her. And so she had to tweak that activity and make it be something that was more reflective of her personality. So doing that and recognizing, what is you, because you want this to be a reflection of your personality and you as a person as well. So just let them see that. And I think it's really important to issue a challenge after you learn a new concept or a new information. And it's to start by first recognizing what you already do well with lesson planning. What is something that's already a strength that you have? That's your glow, right? That's the thing that you already incorporate or do consistently. And then based off of what you learned today, and I think Jinte already spoke to this a little bit, pick one, maybe two things that you want to improve. Don't try to take on too much. If you do that, you're going to lose momentum, you're going to lose steam. So just think about one area of growth, one thing that you want to try to incorporate, one takeaway, get that down and under your belt. And then if you want to take on another one, then definitely do so. But I think it's really important, especially if a lot of this information was new to you, to really hone in on something specific that you want to take with you and move forward. And taking that opportunity now to do that is going to really take this from, a concept to actually the reality and where the rubber hits the road for changing your practice. Jinte, did you want to speak to that at all as well?
Yeah, I just think that, many times when I receive lessons, I, change and tweak things. I love curriculum books. I think they're awesome. But I, very rarely take a lesson word for word from another counselor or from a book and just do it exactly the way it was written. Because, you just really have to put your own personality and spin on things. I am super high energy, and everybody is that's not their personality, and that's okay. I've seen super laid back, soothing, very calming school counselors present and execute amazing lessons. So I just think, like I said, it's just really what you're comfortable with. I'm also really comfortable ad-libbing and just kind of flying by the seat of my pants sometimes, but I know some counselors need to be very scripted. And so I think it's important to plan for what your passion is. So plan with passion.
I love that. So finally, we kind of want to share with you what to do from here. So if you return back to the Virginia Department of Education school counseling webpage, where perhaps you found this webinar, you should find an actual exit ticket for this webinar. You're going to click on that, and that's going to give you the opportunity to provide us with some feedback on your learning today. It's going to ask you a couple questions to evaluate your learning. And then after you complete those, and if you answer the questions correctly, then you'll be prompted to click on a link that's going to take you to a certificate that can show that you completed this webinar. So make sure that you take the time to circle back to the webpage and go to that exit ticket so that you can get that certificate of completion, and also provide us with that super valuable feedback so that we can make sure that we are delivering information that is useful and relevant moving forward. So we really appreciate your time and energy and your desire to increase your your skill set and strengthen your comprehensive school counseling program. Lessons, it's a vital piece of that. It's a piece of that foundation, that tier one, that we really need to value and make sure that we're doing it in the best way. So thank you for recognizing that, for valuing that, and for just your dedication, your energy, and your desire to grow and be the best school counselor that you can be for yourself, as well as the students that you serve and support. So thank you, and thank you, Gente, for offering us your talents, your expertise, and just your energy and wisdom. We really appreciate you. Take care.